Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to pick up where we left off in the previous, where in the previous video, we have the search box here wired up with the refiners of the job posting results. So, as to kind of recap, we have 100,000 job postings stored in a SharePoint list, and we're just using the out-of-the-box restAPI search, out-of-the-box search API for SharePoint to surface the refiners, distinct values of departments and the locations, and we're using the search refiners to make that happen. But this is not wired up, so the only thing that we did, where we kind of ended in the previous video, was just to kind of load up these options for each one of these. But the button here is not wired up, and we can't pass the information on. So what we need to do is to allow the user to type in information here and select the department and have that filtered the location based on that department. So which location have a services job opening, and then be able to put in keywords and hit submit. And once they do this button click, we should take them to this page here, which is the job search results page. And we want to pass in that information via query string parameters, so that way this Angular component will be able to take those parameters, make a backend service call against the out-of-the-box search REST API, and display the results based on what's in the parameters. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So what we want to do, let's go ahead and pop over into our project, and let's first start with the slideshow. And the slideshow is the one that actually have the search input parameters or search options. Now, the first thing I want to do, only because I'm a little stickler about this type of stuff, is I want to clean up any of the dead code, commented code that we started with as we're converting the design page over to an Angular component and Angular templates. I'm going to go ahead and clean some of that stuff up. The other thing I want to do, I want to invalidate some of these classes, because I think the designer of this design package, what they were doing is using some of these classes and names to use global jQuery selectors to manipulate the behavior of this, because we're starting to see some very odd behavior. So what I want to do, I want to just go ahead and comment these out, these classes, make these classes invalid, and I think that's it. And then what I also want to do is change some of these names to be more specific to what we're using it for. And one of the things I noticed, because for this input name for search, because it was using what I suspect is a common variable S, the browser is picking up, is trying to be smart, right, and do some intelligence or type, did you mean type things for this input, and start to suggest different inputs, and they're kind of invalid. So we want to change these names. So JP location, keywords, and then for this one, this will be JP department. So we want to go ahead and clean these up. And what we also want to do here is to go ahead and comment out select department, select location. Let's just make sure these are valid options. And we also want to pass these in as variables as well. Values as well for these different options. And these should be our default options. All right, go ahead and hit save there. Let me just push this up real quick just to make sure we did not kill anything. And then we'll get moving forward with wiring up our page. So let's go to, oops, sorry for the multiple windows. Let's go to this guy here. I'm going to just do a Control F5 so that way we get the latest and greatest. And hopefully after those renaming of the search boxes, we should be able to, yeah, these are coming out a lot cleaner. Uh-oh, this was too much. We have to bring that one back. But this is a lot cleaner. It's easier to read because, you know, the contrast is higher versus that gray versus darker gray where the contrast is not that great. But we have to unfortunately bring that back. So let's bring back control form. Let's push this up there because that's the, you know, we don't want to get into having to resize and all this other stuff or going to a huge CSS exercise just to get that box looking correctly. And we'll just live with the gray on gray for now. You know, obviously we can go in there and do an override to get that looking to where we need to look, the way it needs to look. Let's just take a look here now. All right, so this is fine. All right, so we're good there. All right, so now what we want to do, and this is just going to refresh the page now that button click. So that's going to refresh the page. So let's go ahead and wire up our change event. So what we have here is we have this select option, and we want to wire this up to where anytime there's a change, we fire off a function that will actually update the location collection. Right, so I'm just putting here update locations. And also what we want to do is that anytime an option is selected, we need a variable to hold the selected value, and we do that with an ng model. Right, and this is one of the powers of Angular, is that it's two-way binding. So you select this variable once, and either component can update the variable. You can have the backend component, the backend JavaScript update it, and it will automatically reflect that value here in the HTML. Or you can have the user update it via interacting with this HTML tag, and it will automatically make that value available in the code behind or in the component without any additional work. This is something that we get for free, and it makes coding this type of thing very, very, very easy and straightforward. So here I'm going to just drop it into this local variable called location. And we're not going to do a change event on location because our cascading drop down is going to be one way. So what I mean by one way is that if you're looking at this, when I change the department options, I wanted to filter the location based on that department. But what I'm not going to do is to come here and change the location option and have that affect the department. So this is only going to be one way. It's going to be left to right, and then they'll select the search and then execute it. That's just the scope of our change. Obviously, we can go in there and manipulate at some additional logic to manage state and determine, when it's the fresh page load versus when they're in the cascading process, so on and so forth. But we're going to try to keep it simple and straightforward for now. All right, so what we have now, we have these two variables, and we have a function that really needs to be defined in our component. So let's drop down to our component. And in our component, we're going to be dealing with the slider. So this guy here, because we're dealing with the slider template. And in here, what we want to do is let's go ahead and initialize our component variables. So we have private variables and we have our component variables. These are our component variables. And we're going to initialize these to an empty string initially. So we got one for location, we got one for department. All right, so that's going to be our initial state. And then what we want to do is go ahead and define our event function that's going to fire when update location is called. And I'm doing the danger of typing all this by hand. So a typo could send us in a whirlwind, but we'll take our chances. And to be honest, I probably coded this 3 times already because there were so many gotchas that I did not account for. So I probably coded this 3 times already. So I'm pretty fluent on what needs to happen. So I got update location here, and I have my variables that's going to hold the values of the selected value for the location and department. So this is great. So when I get update location, what I want to do is recall this refiner method. All right, this is our backend restAPI call. Let's get rid of all of this code for now. And that's going to reset the location. So what we're going to do, we don't want to touch the department collection. We just want to update the location collection. But we also want to pass in the selected department, because that's what we're going to filter on, right? All right, so that's good, and let's just save that. And now let's drop into our services layer, right? Because what we have to do, we're adding different parameters to this get job refiner, but this method is not built to handle that yet. So let's go ahead and make the modifications needed. So get job refiner. Let's expand this out. We're going to pass in the department. Department. and that's going to allow us to filter on that. Now that we have department, there's a string manipulation that's required to make this work, and basically we have this URL already set up. This is our SharePoint API URL, and this is basically just getting refiners. That's why we're bringing back a row count of one. Only one record. And then these are the refiners that we're looking into. And I believe 00 is department. Let's see. Yep, 00 is department and 01 is location. So right now we're only dealing with these two refiners. But what we want to do is that we want to filter on the refiner. Now this is important on what we're doing. So of course we can do a filter by as a query string text. But what that's going to do, that's going to give us a different type of filter. It's going to filter everything that it searches against, right? And it's going to search against many different properties, right? That's defined by or many different properties that we could potentially select. But what we want to do, we want to make sure that because we are filtering by refiner, that we're only filtering by a specific refiner for a specified value. And in order to do that, we have to have this weird syntax notation. Let me just pull it up here in my cheat sheet. We have to have this weird syntax notation that does something like this. Let me pull this out. Actually, I don't have a good example of that. I thought I did. Give me 1 second. How do you refine by... Okay, so filter refiner. Let me just bring this example over here. Let me comment this out, paste this in. So basically, this is what we're doing. So we're gonna obviously we do an API call, but then you have this special syntax for a filter refiner, which is this guy here. It's your managed property, and it says equals to, and then whatever value you want to do for the equal logic. So what we're going to do, because we're only doing this for a department, we're actually going to call a reusable function. And though the filter case in this scenario is pretty straightforward, when we get to taking the query string parameters for the search results and rebuilding the logic needed for the results, the filtering capability gets a little bit complex. So I've went out and built and tested this method, and of course, because you're watching this video, you're going to get a copy of this as well. And I'm going to just paste this in as a reusable function. And basically, I'm looking at, okay, when you get to the result set, the user could specify a department, they can specify a location, and we need to filter refiners by either or both of those. And this handles that logic. So if it's by location only, this is the refiner. If it's by department only, this is the refiner. If it's both location and department, you have to do the syntax changes a bit. So you have to do, there's like a comma delimited list wrapped into an and method in order to filter refiner. So this is going to put all that together for us and then return the correct filter string that's needed. So in our case, we are very to call this is pretty straightforward. So now what I need to do for our public method for the get job refiner, I just need to pass in the filter or get the filter and actually have that guy return department, and then for location we're just going to pass in null because we're not dealing with location, and that's going to set my filter string here. And once I have my filter string, because if I pass in null, or if the user did not select a department and they just go with keyword only, then this will update accordingly and just give me a empty string for the filter. So I can safely just go ahead and inject this guy here with a double quote, just standard string concatenation, and then just drop this guy here, and I am done. right? Let me just double check something. I want to make sure that the ampersand comes with that filter string. So, yep. So we're covered. I just want to make sure it has an ampersand with that filter string. So we're good. We're good, and that's the power of reusable functions. And now we can reuse this in many different scenarios. So let me go ahead and collapse this to keep this clean and readable. And we can get rid of this. And what we want to do, we just want to confirm that this URL is being formatted correctly. So let's just log this out, console.log, and just say refiner URL equals, and then just paste that in. And save this off. Alright, so now let's push up services, let's push up the template, and then publish these up. And then we want to take a look at this in the developer tools. And let's just make sure this thing is working as expected. Alright. So hard refresh here, Control F5 is going to do the trick. And let's do F12. Look at our console. Search query is not defined. What happened? What did I do? So let's click on services. Search query is not defined. Get query search. Is this? Oh, this must be carryover. Huh. So much for proven and tested, right? That's odd. That's odd that this didn't pop up before. I understand what's happening, so let me fix this up. I guess there was a variable in here that I was using, but I'm no longer using. So yeah, so this needs to be updated to location only, department only. I was going to pass these in as an object and have these as properties on that object, just to make it a little bit scalable. So that way, as we add additional refiners, if we went to a scenario where we need additional refiners, your parameters for this method would not just grow out of control, right? Where you have 4 or 5 parameters, you just pass in one parameter as an object, and then within there, you would use properties to define that. So that was a good catch. So that was a residue of a different approach. So we go ahead and clean that up a little bit. And then also, let's get rid of this. I want to keep this one because I want to just highlight, just be a little bit explicit of what the syntax or the format of that string should be. So we're going to keep that raw and already commented inside. And let's just save this and push this up. Okay. Sorry about that. I thought I corrected all this stuff. So let me push this up now. Control F5. And how do we do? So from the console, this is my URL. And as you can see, there are no refiners. And then if I go back and select one of these guys, so if I do department, oh, we're not calling it, are we? Yeah, because I did this change request or change event, and nothing fired. All right, so let's go up here and let's go to our component and let's make sure we're actually calling the new. Oh, we are calling it. Update location. Let's just double check the spelling. Again, spelling may be the death of me. Let's see what we got here. On change, ng change, update locations, plural, and we have singular. See? That's what happens when you don't copy and paste. You get all these typos. Alright, so let's go here. F5 again. Alright, so our initial call was there, and this is evidence that we're actually calling the method. It was just that my change event was not wired up. Okay, so now my change event is wired up. Ooh, and we're starting to get some other stuff. Refine filter. Okay. That was weird. All that red. Oh, it probably was because I selected this. Yeah, that generates a lot of nastiness. because it's that hashtag1 that's in here. That's an invalid option anyway, but the hashtag1 needs to be encoded, so that way we're passing the right strings back. I probably should encode these anyway, right? So okay, so in the end, the refiner looks good, and based off of this, we should be filtering on the different cities based on the department. They actually have job postings within that city. Now, it's going to be hard to tell that this is actually filtering, because the sample data that we're using, because you know how we use that data generator, and that data generator made sure that we had data, actually even amounts of data, very close to even amounts of data across these different departments. So we're not going to get a huge change, and if any, we're not going to see a lot of change here unless we go to the data and set up specific scenarios, right? But just looking at the way we're consoled out, we're logged out, we know that we're passing the right parameters, and we just trust that the results are true for now, and we can actually go ahead and test those out. So one of the things I do want to do is, as I'm changing these values here, it's not clear to the user that they have to reselect the city, right? So ideally what would happen is that I will select sales, and sales may only be in 5 of the available cities once the real data gets kicked in. And we need to show them that they need to reselect that. So let's go ahead and change that. So if we go to our template, the one thing we want to do is to make sure we have a default value. We just want to reset them back to this default value, which is select location. And then our component, when we do the update and we set the new collection here in the locations collection, we're going to also set location singular to this value here, and that'll be an indicator that they need to reset and reformat. Reselect the location. Now, another thing we want to do is, before we call this backend method and have that loaded up again, let's just empty this out into the array. That was the original location. There's been instances where I've seen, just playing around with this, let me go ahead and push this up. Just playing around with this, there's been, though Angular does a really good job with that two-way binding, there's been instances when I've seen residue to where, if there was a county and it only had 5 matching cities, it will not refresh this collection, right? And that's why I have that empty array in there before I make a backend call to get the fresh collection. I really wish that the data was not as balanced, and I had some variation that I can really confirm that with. That would be pretty cool. But cascading drop down is really, really popular these days because it makes sense, right? What you want to do is just avoid your user from selecting options that will yield 0 results, right? So you want to get them closer to what the available options are. All right, so this is working as expected. So now every time I select the change, it resets the value to select location, which will prompt them to update their location. All right, so now we're good with that. And then now what we want to do is set up our button ngClick to send the selected values over to our results page. And our results page, let's just go ahead and grab a URL to our results page. And now let's dump into our component to where we can actually, let's do another function that's going to respond to an event. Let's just call it execute search. And basically what we want to do is set window location to this variable, this URL, and then we want to decorate this URL with the needed parameters. So in our case, we're going to be control dot. I don't think I have one for keywords, so we actually need to store the keywords as well. So let's just add this guy here, and this is what they will put inside the text box. So keywords, there we go, and ampersand loc for location, control.location, and then ampersand dpt for department. Right, and that's it. Now, obviously, I'm cheating here because I'm doing a relative URL, assuming that we're working in a root site collection. But obviously, what you want to do to make this site collection friendly, where you can run this in any site collection, not necessarily the root, and have those URLs respond accordingly. We want to do a actually this doesn't need to be a component variable. This can be a local variable. So what we want to do, we want to do this var site URL to make it local, and then we have a get site URL reusable function, which actually will go in and grab the current site collection URL, and we will just use this guy, put it here, and I don't think I need a leading parenthesis. I'm sorry, leading slash with that. All right, so let me just confirm this query string setup. K equals keywords, location, department. Okay. And now what we want to do is go inside of our, oops. I just did select all. Let me just save. All right. Now what we want to do is go inside of our template and have this guy call when the search button is clicked. So if I go to this slideshow, let's go down here where my search button is. And that's going to be this guy here. Now, there's a couple things we want to do, and this is just with me testing this out before. The first thing you do, you want to change the submit type to button type, or else when you click the button, it does a post back on the, like what we do for forms. The other thing we want to do is make this ng model, right? So where we're storing the value in this text box to our component variable, and we name that vm.keywords plural. And finally, just wire up this button. So instead of this, what the designer has, just kind of manipulating this to go to a different page, we want to do an ng click and send them to our execute search method. Just like that. Okay. Now, another thing we can do, and this is just icing on the cake to make this thing a little bit slicker, is that I figured out, meaning did a Google search on how do you hit the enter key and have that execute a method, right? So on this input box, obviously what happens is that you're typing in, you want to hit the enter key, since you're dealing with the keyboard versus moving your hand to the mouse and selecting the search button. This snippet right here, which is actually clean, it's not intuitive though. It's clean because it's a one-liner and it's going to do exactly what we need to do. But let me explain what it's doing. So obviously we know that anytime that you hit the key on the keyboard within the inbox, there's an event that fires. So we're wired up to this event. So the key up event. So after you press the key and it comes up, it checks the key code for that particular event, right? That's what the $ event does. And the enter key, obviously all these keys have a special code. The enter key is 13, and most of us know this, just dealing with this in general. But here's the thing that's slick about it. Of course, you can compare this, or you can check the value of this and then go off and do something else. But what it's doing is using the rule for a condition, especially an AND condition, to where when you have an AND condition, if this is true, then it looks and evaluates the second statement in a condition. That's just, C#. Most of these programming languages do the exact same thing. So it checks these one at a time, and it always checks this one first, and then it checks the second. So if this is false, it doesn't even check the second one. And we're leveraging that here. So it's actually really slick. It's elegant, but again, it's not intuitive. That's why it works. But this is why it works. So like if you change these, like if you change the order of these, it will always, so key up, it will always execute the search, which is not what we want. We only want it to execute the search when they actually hit the enter key. So again, just steal that and apply that anywhere you need to use a enter key to execute a component function. That's just a very slick way to do that. All right, what else? Let's test it. All right, I think we have everything wired up, so let's just test it out. Publish this up and see if this works. And if this works, I think that would be a great breaking point to where if we can get values going to the other page and we're doing what we need to do with cascading and all this other good stuff, let's just break for this video and then we'll pick up everything else in the next video. But looking at the console, we got more work to do. Function is not defined. Okay. You got to spell it right, Deshaun. You got to spell it right. All right, so let's go to, that was in the component, right? Yep. Freehand coding, especially when you're not in Visual Studio Code or TypeScript. All right, so here we go. And let's test it out again, Control F5. So far good. We're logging out clean. All right, so let's go here. Let's test this bad boy. Select it. Select. And just do health. I think health is usually a title. Execute search. And there we go. We got health for the keyword. Location is Chicago. And business development was the department. All right, so we test it again. Let's just select Chicago and hit search. Looks good, looks good. And that's a valid case, right? They don't have to put in a keyword. They can just select a location and then execute. All right. So that's it for this video. And I'll catch you in the next video. And I'll see you in the comment section. And let me know if there's any questions. Okay, talk to you soon.